Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Well, today I brought for you all February-March 2026 0455 variant 22. We'll be doing paper 2 today and we'll be dealing with section A. Let's see what this paper has brought for us today. Moving forward, as usual, we'll be reading the source material first, then we will be doing the questions. All right. The source material they've given us talks about Senegal. Now, the question which they are asking is, will Senegal escape poverty? They've given us a fact file, a table that displays data for 2023. They've displayed the population that hovered around 19 million. GDP was $31 million. Workers' remittances as a percentage of GDP was 9%. HDI value stood at 0.517. Further, they are saying Senegal, a Northeast African country, has some of its workers employed in other countries. These workers send a percentage of their wages back home to their relatives, and as we know, this is called as workers' remittances. Now, due to their relatively low incomes, most Senegalese households spend all of these remittances. That means Senegal population is highly dependent upon the remittances sent back home by their acquaintances. However, some households do not spend all of the money once they receive it, depending upon two key factors: the interest rates and the confidence level. So, when the interest rates are high or when the confidence level is low, then what do Senegalese do? They save a proportion of the remittances they get. All right. Now, what else did they say? A relatively high proportion of workers in Senegal are employed in agriculture. That means most of the population of Senegal works in the primary sector, agriculture, farm-based. The crops grown in Senegal are affected by extreme heat and droughts. So now there are weather conditions that affect the productivity of the farm output. Heat and drought are the barriers. These weather conditions are one reason why the country grows the crop sorghum, which does not need much water during its growth. Sorghum is low in calories and so also help people who consume it to lose weight. So it's a dual function. A, it uses less water, so it satisfies the weather conditions of Senegal. B, it helps people lose calories, so those who are weight conscious, they can consume more of it. Further, they say Senegal is a net exporter of sorghum. So this means the country is self-sufficient in its production in such a way that it not only is consuming it back at home, yet its production is also used as a key export item. It is also the largest African exporter of rice after Nigeria. So Senegal exports two prime agriculture products, sorghum and rice. Greater use of capital equipment in the production of both sorghum and rice could affect productivity. So now they say if capital equipment is used, it is more likely that the country is going to have more production, right? It's going to boost productivity. Further, they say this may reduce the deficit in the current account of Senegal's balance of payment, and they are of the view that this is going to turn the BOP position in favor of Senegal. This means imports are going to fall, exports are going to rise, reducing the balance of payment deficit. All right. The Senegalese government wants to develop the country's secondary and tertiary sectors to improve the economic performance. It also expects that this will reduce poverty as measured by those living on $6.85 or less a day. So now they are saying currently Senegalese are living at $6.85 or less per day, right? They are now displaying a table again that displays two key indicators, GDP per head and the percentage of population living in poverty in selected countries. So now what they've done is for the year 2023, they've displayed us these six countries, and for each of these countries, they have given us two key indicators. One is the GDP per head in dollars, and the second they've given us a percentage of population of each of these countries that is living in poverty. So now if you notice, the countries that are enjoying a high GDP per head, the population that is in poverty is relatively low. So if you just skim through the table and if you just glance through it, so Iceland is the country that is having the highest GDP per head, $73,500. And what about the percentage of population? 0%. So 0% of its population is in poverty. So what does it show? That the higher the GDP per head, the lower the population would be in poverty, the lesser amount, or vice versa, right? Further, they say a related aim of the Senegalese government is to increase the country's HDI value. So, A, it wanted to more of its people to be employed in the tertiary and the secondary sector. Further, it says that it wants to, that it hopes that capital equipment is going to reduce the VUP deficit. Further, it says that it wants to improve the HDI value, and for that, it thinks that usage of fiscal policy measures. That means what? Government expenditure and taxes, right? What tools come under fiscal policy? We talk about government expenditure and taxes. So they say that the use of fiscal policy measures is going to improve the three components of the HDI value, right? Which means education, health, and life expectancy, right? Including life expectancy. Changes in fiscal policy can also affect the markets for Senegalese products, including gold. So now they say fiscal policy is going to also affect how Senegalese consume gold or demand gold. Among the influences on the PED for gold are changes in income, availability of substitutes, and the extent to which gold is seen as a luxury. So now they say the price elasticity demand for gold depends upon these three key indicators, that is, whether gold is viewed as a luxury or not, are close substitutes available for gold, and how much income is fluctuated. So this in turn affects the demand for gold and the responsiveness of how the gold demand is to changes in its price. I hope it's clear. Now, moving forward to the questions. Part A, it's a 1 mark question. It's asking us to calculate the value of Senegal's workers' remittances in 2023. So now if you look at the right side, I have solved this figure for you. I'll zoom in a little so that it's more clearer. All right. For this, we'll look into the first table. We want to calculate the value of Senegal's workers' remittances in 2023. So now if you see, they say workers' remittances as a percentage of GDP was 9%. So 9% of GDP means 9 upon 100 into the GDP value, which was $31 billion. So we took these two key figures from this table. So 9 upon 100 at 0.09 into $31 billion is going to give us $2.79 billion. That's the value of Senegal's worker remittances in 2023. You've shown the working, you've done this part, straight 1 mark. Part B. Part B asks us to identify two influences on household spending in Senegal, right? So you just need to identify, you just need to list down. They've already told us that household spending depends on what? The interest rates and the confidence level. So either you could say it depends upon the future outlook, how optimistic or promising it seemed to be, or it could be the level of incomes as well. If Senegalese are expected to earn higher incomes, right? Plus, it depends on the interest rates. If the interest rates are expected to rise, then they are going to be saving more, right? It also depends on consumer confidence or the level of consumer expectations, right? What does the consumer thinks about how promising the future looks? So you list down any of these two key factors and you'll get straight 2 marks. Moving forward, part C. Part C says explain one cause of a decrease in the quality of land used in agriculture in Senegal. So we know that the quality of land was affected by what? Heat and drought. So that's exactly what we are going to mention here. We are going to say that Senegal's quality of land is greatly hampered or affected by the heat and drought, the weather conditions of the country. Why? Because it destroys the nutrients and the moisture that's present in the soil. If this reduces the fertility of the soil, the land loses its quality. As a result, its productivity falls, the farm output decreases, overall, the agricultural output dips or falls or reduces. So it's a 2 mark question. They asked us to explain one cause. So you explained the cause, you listed the cause, and you explained it. So 1 mark was for the reason, 1 mark was for the explanation, and you get straight 2 marks. Get it? I hope it's clear. Moving forward, part D. Part D asks us to explain how greater use of capital equipment in agriculture could reduce the deficit on current account on BOP. So now they are asking, how do you think more usage of capital equipment, which is what? Man-made equipment used to further facilitate in production. So now how do you think mechanization or more capital equipment is going to help Senegal reduce the deficit on its BOP? Now it's a 4 mark question. How are you going to get the marks? 1 mark for identification for the first reason, plus explanation of that reason is going to get you 2 marks. The third mark you will get once you identify the second reason, and upon explanation of the second reason, you'll get full 4 marks, right? Now, how will you go about explaining it? You'll say more usage of capital equipment means that the productivity of Senegal is going to rise, the output level, farm output is going to expand, especially for sorghum and rice. As a result, the country is going to be self-sufficient in producing it. So not only it's going to be being consumed locally, it also could be exported. As a result, efficiency is going to increase. Plus, when the country, Senegal, is going to export more of it and consume more of it even locally, so imports are going to fall, exports are going to rise, overall current account deficit would shrink, right? And we all know that already the country is a largest exporter of rice. So, usage of capital equipment would help it capitalize on this comparative advantage, thereby shrinking the gap, shrinking the current account deficit, the size of the current account deficit. So, when exports are going to rise and exports are going to when exports are going to rise and imports are going to fall, POP deficit is automatically going to shrink or reduce in size. If given that, you'll get straight 4 marks. I hope it's clear. Moving forward, part E. Part E asks us to draw a demand and a supply diagram to show how more people trying to lose weight would affect the market for sorghum. So now if more people want to lose weight, what do they want to do? They want to consume more of sorghum. So when they want to consume more of sorghum, what will happen to the demand for sorghum? The demand for sorghum is going to rise. So when the demand for sorghum would rise, what should happen to the demand curve? It should move towards the right, right, showing an increase or a surge in demand. So that's exactly what we are going to be doing. It's a 4-mark question. Now, how are the marks going to be allocated? The first mark you are going to get for drawing the correct axis, both the vertical and the horizontal. So the vertical axis should display the price, the horizontal axis should display the quantity. The second mark you will get for drawing the initial demand in the supply diagram. So you will show the initial downward sloping demand curve and the initial upward sloping supply curve, D and S, showing the initial equilibrium level. The third mark you will get for showing the shift of the demand curve towards the right from D to D1, D1, right? The final fourth mark you will get to show the equilibrium positions that shifted from E to E1, showing an increase in price and an increase in the quantity demanded from Q to Q1, right? So this is how you get 4 full marks. You just need to draw the diagram. If you want, you can give the statement, otherwise there's no need. Full 4 marks will be awarded to you once you've satisfied all these 4 requirements. You fulfill these 4 requirements. Part F. Part F is an analyze question. It's asking you to analyze the relationship between GDP per head and the percentage of population living in poverty. For this, we'll refer to the second table they had given us. Now, this was the second table they gave us. I'll zoom in a bit. Now, if you look at the table displays 6 countries. The first variable shows the GDP per head. The second talks about the percentage of population living in poverty. So now, if you notice, what's the relationship? It's a negative or an indirect relationship. So first you're going to mention that there exists a negative or an indirect relationship between GDP per head and the percentage of population living in poverty. This shows that as GDP per head rises, the percentage of population living in poverty falls, or as GDP per head falls, the percentage of population living in poverty rises. You fulfill these 2 requirements, you'll get straight 2 marks. Then you'll go on giving examples that you'll say that the country that's getting the highest GDP per head is Iceland. It's being followed by Canada, then it's Romania, then it's South Africa, right? So if you look at these 4 countries in this ascending order, so you'll notice that the country earning the highest GDP per head has the lowest or the smallest amount of population living in poverty. So as GDP per head falls, the percentage of population in poverty rises, or as GDP per head rises, the percentage of population living in poverty falls. Now you'll go about giving the explanation. Why is this so? Now, as GDP per head rises, this means that income per head rises. So if income per head rises, people of the country experiences a higher standard of living. This means they've got better access to healthcare. So the population is able to get hold of the basic necessities of life and also enjoy the luxuries. So it's better off. It's able to combat both absolute poverty and relative poverty. So absolute poverty also reduces and the proportion of population experiencing relative poverty also reduces. So overall quality of life improves. Get it? So far you've gotten already 4 marks. Now you'll say, however, there exists an exception. However, there exists an anomaly. And what's that? If you notice, the remaining two countries, Papua New Guinea, right? Papua New Guinea, New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and Senegal. So Senegal is having a GDP per head of 1600. Its percentage of population is living under poverty is 75.6. What about Papua New Guinea? It's enjoying a GDP per head of 3010, almost twice of that of Senegal. But the percentage of population living in poverty is relatively higher. So now this contradicts, because what had we determined that if the GDP per head is higher, the proportion of population living in poverty should be low. But in this case, it's the opposite. So this is the exception. So what could be the reason that though despite Senegal having a GDP per head lower than Papua New Guinea, is having a percentage of population living in poverty lesser? How would you attribute this? What reason would you attribute to this disparity or this anomaly? It could be that maybe income in Senegal is evenly distributed, or Senegal is producing goods that are not measured in GDP. Right? So you'll give the reason for this anomaly. If given this reason, you'll get full 6 marks. I hope this is clear. Moving forward, part full 5 marks. Not 6, full 5 marks. Alright, part G. Part G is a discuss question. Now we know that in order to produce a response that caters to the higher tier band in a discussed answer, for that 4 to 6 mark tier band, for that high level response, you need to produce a well balanced argument that satisfies both parts of the statement. If you aren't able to produce a justified argument, then you will not be rewarded more than 4 marks. Right? So you need to produce that well developed chain analysis in your answers. Now, part G is asking whether fiscal policy will increase a country's HDI value. So we know Human Development Index is a measure that gives us a picture of the standard of living of a population, right? So it uses those 3 key indicators, right? Healthcare, life expectancy, education. So if the government spends more on healthcare, so what happens? Its life expectancy increases, its quality of life is going to increase. Fiscal policy is what? Government expenditure and taxes. If the government spends more on healthcare, life expectancy is going to improve, quality of life is going to improve, it's going to rise. If the government decides to spend more on education, so what will happen? The average years of schooling will rise, the literacy rate would improve, so the expected years of schooling would also increase. If the government decides to adopt expansionary fiscal policy, that means it decides to reduce taxes. So what's going to happen? If it reduces direct taxes, so firms are going to expand their production level, right? And as a result, what will happen? They'll employ more labor. So overall unemployment level is going to fall. Plus, people are going to enjoy a higher disposable income. So overall aggregate demand is going to rise. So output level is going to expand, right? Firms are going to increase their output level. income level is going to rise. Quality of life is again going to improve. Further, if the government decides to give more subsidies, again firms are going to increase their output levels, the production activity is going to increase, unemployment level is going to fall, GDP per head is going to rise. As a result, standard of living is going to increase, right? So HDI is going to be all positive. It's going to improve the country's HDI value. However, it could be that expansionary fiscal policy, such as reducing the level of taxes or the amount of taxes or the percentage of taxes, could cause an increase in inflation if the country is already operating at full capacity. So instead of increasing the country's HDI value, it might worsen of the situation, causing the real GDP to fall, causing the healthcare to fall. Why? Because if it's going to increase the inflation value, right? So in reality, what's going to happen that the quality of life is going to fall, real GDP is going to fall. It could also be that a reduction in taxes could reduce the government revenue. So as a result, the government would be having less to be spent on the provision of merit goods such as education and healthcare. So what's going to happen then? That means that the HDI value is going to fall, standard of living is going to fall. It could be that if the government decides to increase taxation, so what's going to happen is going to give pay way for a black economy. People are going to evade taxes. As a result, again, government revenue is going to fall. So this means government would have then again less money to be spent on education and healthcare and the welfare of people. So HDI value is not going to improve then. If the government decides to reduce its expenditure, so again life expectancy is going to fall. Again, quality of life is going to deteriorate. So the conclusion would be that fiscal policy can increase HDI value, but its effectiveness depends on how efficient the government is and how effectively it allocates its scarce resources. Right? I hope this is clear. Last part H. Again, it's a discuss mark question. It's a 6-mark question. It's asking whether or not the demand for gold is going to be price elastic in future. So now again, it's a 6-mark question. You need to produce a well-balanced response. The last paragraph had this answer. Remember, they said the Senegalese market for gold is going to be affected by changes in income, availability of substitutes, and whether or not if gold is perceived as a luxury item. So now using these plus other reasons, we'll write a good response. How? We'll say that the demand for gold can be price elastic in future if the income levels fall. So if the income levels are going to fall, then it could be that the price elasticity of demand is elastic, that the demand for gold is relatively elastic. It's going to fluctuate. It's going to be highly responsive if the level of income is falling. Plus, if the price of substitutes fall, that means if rose gold or silver is deemed to be a close substitute for gold, and if the price of rose gold falls, so then consumers are going to switch their demand for gold to these substitutes, or if the quality of these substitutes improves. So again, PED for gold is going to be high, right? It's going to be elastic. Plus, if the quality of these substitutes improve, then also it's going to be elastic. It could also be if the price of complementary goods rise, that is, if the price of jewels. If the price of jewels rise, so what's going to happen? That the quantity demanded for gold is going to fall, right? It's going to then fluctuate, right? It's going to be responsive. Plus, if the consumers have more time, then PED for gold is going to be responsive, right? It's going to be sensitive. However, it could be that the demand for gold might not be elastic or could be inelastic in future if gold becomes a part of everyday life. If gold is a part of Senegal's culture, right? If it becomes a necessity, then even though the price might fluctuate or might rise, there might be little or no change in its quantity demanded. Or it could be if in future income levels rise, so rise in the price of gold might not affect the demand for gold. It could also be that if gold is used in the production of other goods, then also it might not be that responsive, PED, right? Plus, if less close substitutes are available for gold, then even though price might rise, there might be little or no change or little or no fall in its quantity demanded. It could also be that if gold is deemed as a store of value, then even though its price might rise in future, since it's termed as a good store of value, its PED would be inelastic. So the conclusion is that demand could be more price sensitive or elastic or responsive if incomes are falling or substitutes for gold exist. It could in turn be inelastic if it serves to be a store of value or it is considered to be culturally significant. I hope you understood and you enjoyed solving this March 2026 0455 variant 22 with me. I'll be back with more questions from section B of this paper. Stay tuned, subscribe, happy learning.